Today's episode of Path to Power is brought to you by Greenman, an Irish investment management firm with over 20 years of experience.
Greenman Open is a European long-term investment fund, or LTIF. It's focused on grocery-anchored retail real estate. These are the kinds of properties that some investors believe remain essential even in uncertain markets. People still need to buy food. That's what they say makes this sector more resilient and more stable over the long term.
Unlike many alternative investment funds that are only available to professionals, Greenman Open is open to a wide range of investors with lower minimum investments and a highly regulated structure.
Just remember, all investments carry risk. Values can go up or down, and past performance isn't a reliable guide to future returns. Greenman Open is a regulated LTIF, but you should always speak to a financial advisor before investing. Learn more on the website greenmanopen.com.
Hello and welcome to this, our latest edition of Path to Power. I'm Matt Cooper.
And I'm Ivan Yates.
We're going to be spending quite a bit of time later assessing now the likelihood that Mary Lou McDonald might become president of the country later this year if she stands, and the hints are now flying around that she intends to do so. Could anyone beat her on the way to the Oris? We'll get to that later. But Ivan, I want to start with three of your hobby horses, which very much came to the forefront this week. First of all, it seems that Jim O'Callaghan has been listening to you because he decided not to introduce the new enhanced figures for awards as part of the legal system, much to the relief of the insurance industry. Do you think that's because he's been listening to you?
Well, would you believe it? I've just come from radio where Robert Troy, who has a brief on insurance, said, "Oh no, this was never intended to go at these increases." I like that it was never agreed, and apparently Cian O'Callaghan raised it in the leaders' questions and all this stuff, and Taoiseach said, "Don't believe all you read." First of all, whether or which, I'm absolutely delighted about this.
Don't be modest, Ivan. Claim the credit.
No. In fairness, now, like the thing that really flipped my lid on this was Monday morning, a big set-piece event in government buildings with Taoiseach Taoiseach on competitiveness, that we need to be competitiveness and all the rest of it. And I was kind of saying to myself, and sorry, on Wednesday, you're going to make us more uncompetitive by having higher insurance costs, by having higher awards. And it made no sense. I'm glad for whatever reason that they saw fit to change this. Obviously, the key issue here is you go through whiplash and how it's treated here. How long you might be out for or whatever. Just take, because I call that a minor injury. And the situation here is that somewhere between 5 and 10 times relative to the UK is the awards that you get. And the legal costs, as we know, are huge. So to have a kind of arbitrary 17% increase was totally unjustified when we're out of line. And we discussed this last week on the podcast, and the insurance industry were up in arms about this. And I put it like this: I always welcomed. It's never a wrong time to do the right thing. And I think Jim O'Callaghan did the right thing, although I'm told he said at the meeting, well, of course, this will solve nothing if we don't do it because the judges are going to increase the awards anyway.
That is possible, isn't it? The judges still have the discretion. They don't have to follow the guidelines, do they?
Yeah, and obviously, if they start going beyond the book of quantum damages, more people will be going the litigation route. And who would that profit? At an average legal cost of 25 grand, only the legal profession. These parasites have been getting away for too much for too long.
Something else you've been banging on about for many a year, well, a year and a half or so that we're on this podcast, is the situation with the giant sewage plant in Clonliffe that Uisce Éireann says is absolutely essential to cope with the demand of a growing population in the Dublin area. 7 years ago it should have been started. There was a problem in relation to the swimming rights of people. There were complaints. Even though it's going to be a narrow pipe that will discharge the sewage about 1 kilometre out into the sea. And for all the environmentalists who might say, oh, that's terrible, you can't be discharging stuff into the sea. Well, where else is it going to go? You have to get rid of it somehow, and you might as well put it into as big a pool of water as you possibly can get. But I was fascinated to see that in the Irish Times coverage of this, the photograph that they used was of this enormous banner poster up at the proposed site, no to sewage plant, whatever and stuff. And it makes you wonder, what do people think? I mean, do they think that they don't want these facilities, or is it always somewhere else? I mean, these protesters, how will they find things if suddenly the sewage started backing up into their toilet because we don't have anywhere to actually sweep it away to?
Yeah, this project has been held up for 6 years now, and the judicial review said that on one feature they didn't do enough adequate consultation between the EPA and On Board Planola. And On Board Planola have now at last resolved this. It's about $1.5 billion, and it'll start in Blanchardstown. The orbital pipe will run up to Clonliffe and right across the north side. And you know, to be honest with you, on my hopefully daily walk in the River Slaney, there's a treatment plant, and the effluent treated clean water goes into the River Slaney. So this is clean water. I think it's actually 6 kilometres out they're doing it into the sea beyond Malahide. So the fact of the matter is this will facilitate 500,000 houses. And if it doesn't happen, it's already several years behind time. But again, never a wrong time to do the right thing. But like, I'm glad now it is still open to further judicial review.
7 or 8 weeks, isn't there, in which somebody can lodge a complaint.
And, you know, so I mean, like, the pesky judiciary might still have the last say on it.
Yeah, well, the law is the law. I mean, like, in fairness, the law is the law. Yeah. So it's a question of whether people are well motivated in actually taking complaints or funding judicial reviews or whatever, or whether they're just cranks. No, there can be times when there are legitimate reasons where you could, but I think in this one, this has been played out for so long and the need is so great, you have to hope that it would.
But just on that, like, judiciary have discretion. What is in the national interest? A publicly funded public utility or the interests of people? And I believe that the housing crisis and the infrastructure needs have not been given the correct weighting by judges. And I'm flat out saying that I think that they have erred in their priorities in all these issues. You would listen to them and you would think there was no housing crisis. And unless they change their ways, we are going to be mired in this mess.
Now, something else. We're going to talk in a little bit of detail about James Brown's change to apartment sizes and other elements of the development of apartments, which may be more significant than smaller studio apartments. But before we get to that, I want to talk about something that we've mentioned countless times on this podcast, and that is Clonliffe College in Drumcondra, near Croke Park, where Hines had its plans to build 1,614 build-to-rent apartments struck down in the courts previously. Nothing to do with the actual size of the apartments or the mix or anything like that, but it was this woman who was a religious person who believed that part of the religious facilities there should continue in use and managed to get the planning permission blocked there. Now Hines has come back, and I have to admit, I'm surprised by what it has come back with. And I should say, I do know Brian Moran, who is the man who runs Hines in Ireland, but I haven't spoken to him recently, and I haven't spoken to him about this. So let me just make that absolutely clear. So I am surprised to see that it's come back with a new plan for 483 fewer apartments than the original application had been from. So it's down now to 1,131 apartments. The height of one of the biggest apartment blocks has been reduced by 5 stories. But really interestingly, there's an extraordinary change in the mix of the apartments. So the number of studio apartments has dropped from 540 in the original plan to 268. The number of one-bed apartments has been reduced from 603 to 392. Here's the really interesting thing. The number of 3-bed apartments is to be increased from 53 to 132, and Hines is going to be delivering 57 4-bedroom apartments, and the original plans had no 4-bedroom apartments in it. And I have to say, having walked the site with Brian Moran previously, it looks like a tremendous place to build loads of apartments. He showed me all of the ideas for amenities as well, how they would use the Holy Cross Chapel and Assembly Hall for cultural use and the rest of it and stuff. But this mix of apartments, to me, sounds way better. This idea of having, if we're going to encourage people in apartment living, 57 4-bedroom apartments, yeah, go for it. Have all of these 3-bedroom apartments. Have far fewer studio apartments. Even though there's a lot less or fewer people who will be accommodated, it strikes me that the new mix is way better. What do you think?
Well, and why do you think it's way better?
Because that way you do develop a sense of community. I think if people can buy a 3 or 4-bedroom apartment, they're much likely to stay there much longer. Whereas if you have built-to-rent studio apartments and 1-beds, yeah, it is going to be more transient. This is a better way of establishing community.
Well, and this does feed into if they knew that the regulations were going to be changed.
That's what I was going to.
Are they maybe going to change some of that? Because, and we'll come on to the apartment change, which I greatly welcome and have lobbied for, because, we've made the point, if you want to buy a car, you can go for a Mini or a Skoda or a Saloon or an SUV, or you can go for a Mercedes. When it comes to apartment choices in this country, you can only buy a BMW equivalent, and that's wrong, and therefore the market should decide at the end of the day. And, where do you think all these young workers, migrant workers, other workers in Dublin, in the city centre, close to public transport, are going to live, and basically, as opposed to commuting? So I actually favour the development that's made. As regards the particular thing, Brian Moran's approach to this, I'm actually agnostic to it. I obviously think the loss of what you call housing for 500 people is a significant factor. But one of the things that I'd just say to you is this, that my understanding of Hines' whole model is that they fill them with tenants and they sell on the stream of income to pension funds or whatever. So therefore, will these actually be for sale?
Some of them will be, apparently, which is an interesting thing as well. I'm not sure, though, that every apartment that gets built could be described as a BMW, because the studio apartments are 37 square metres, and they will now be reduced to 32 square metres. 37 square metres is not an enormous amount of space to fit everything in. That would not be a BMW by living standards. But what I'm going to be really interested to see is that, will there be objections to this new proposed development? Because the likes of some of the leading housing activists like Rory Hearn would have previously described the previous plans as being like the slums of the future, which I think was a completely over the top type of allegation to make. There was also Mary Lou McDonald, as local TD, was also objecting and highly dismissive of what had been planned. They can hardly object to this development, can they, if it's got that mix and if some are going to be made available for sale? If there are objections to this, you would suspect that it's been done solely on the basis of trying to restrict supply in advance of the next general election, when the parties of the opposition hope to exploit the housing crisis and to get into power. So let's just see what actually happens.
And can I just put this in context? Because of early morning conferences, about a dozen times a year, I stay in the Croke Park Hotel. And I walk around on the evening time. I go for a pint or just stretch my legs in the Drumcondra area and this whole Croker area, we'll call it. And you know what? It desperately needs investment. I see why the Monk will get such a big vote. This is a project that's going to cost 600-700 million. I mean, like, how people can't see whether they're dog boxes or whether they're 4-bedroom apartments. The fact of the matter is, this will create footfall. It'll create a sense of community and activity and economic activity as well as social activity in the area. That's pretty shoddy at the moment.
Well, just as an aside, and I don't want to get into Mary Lou for president until later in the podcast, but it has been highlighted that, well, if Mary Lou McDonald did win the presidency, there would have to be a by-election. Would the Monk run again? That's a possibility.
Indeed, his chances in a by-election are a lot less.
They are.
Because, if you're looking for 1 out of 4, you could get the 4th seat.
Yeah.
But for a by-election, you have to get 51% of the vote.
Yeah, so it's unlikely, but it just is one of these things that has to be borne in mind.
Yeah.
Okay, As I said, we'll get to that and Catherine Connolly and Sean Kelly and the Presidency.
Just on the apartment regulations again.
That's where I want to stick
okay. So first of all, a couple of things here. It in a word introduces not just the minimum size change, but it introduced flexibility because the mix of 1, 2 and 3 bedrooms, there's greater facility. People told me that the minimum balcony size was almost the size of some apartments in Paris. Now, they were exaggerating, but balcony size...
They would be exaggerating because many apartments in Paris are smaller than the minimum standards that we have in Ireland.
So the point I'm trying to make is balcony size adds to cost. The dual aspect adds to cost. Now, there's no change in the provision for disabled people. There's no change in relation to what is a very... expensive element of the electrical installments. So someone told me they were getting out of apartments because of the electrical requirements. They said were way over the top. But anything that...
hang on a second. I mean, I can understand why they are because...
To do a fire, is it?
Absolutely. During the Celtic Tiger era, self-certification meant that an awful lot of bandits put in electrical systems and fire distinct which were not fit for purpose. And there have been countless examples of apartment blocks all over the country and hotels which have had to have major retrofits done to make them safe. And unfortunately, there have been fires in locations where cowboys did the work. So you can understand why the standards
I do. But in reaction to this, Rory Hearn, Conor Sheehan and Owner Bryn have all decried this as a step backwards and the kind of stop-go situation going back to Owen Murphy. My default position is this: what does Michael Stanley of Cairn Homes, the largest builder of apartments in this country, say? And he has welcomed it. And, to be honest with you, this is an argument of the best versus being the enemy of the good. This is an argument whereby, actually, if you want to get stuff built, and we talk about build, baby, build, we talk about supply, my first protocol is, what is Mike... And I was quite open if Michael Stanley said, this won't make much difference. He said it would significantly reduce the cost of apartments.
Yeah, but I don't think it's going to reduce them by what the government was claiming. And James Brown said, and it's in the press release, that in some cases, and I suspect it's very few cases, it could reduce the costs in a development per unit by 50 to 100,000. And that ain't the case. I mean, basically, Land Development Agency people were cited as the source of this information. But Paul Mitchell, who's from Mitchell McDermott.
Very reputable professional.
Absolutely.
In this area.
So Paul was not a member of the Housing Commission, but he did a lot of the work for the Housing Commission in relation to costs and the rest of it. And he did a little bit that he came on the last word to tell me about. He put together some figures. He went and he spoke to people and he looked at it, and he says his best estimate is that the savings are 26 to 39,000 at best, depending on the size of the development. Now, you could say that's great. That helps. Every little bit helps and all that sort of stuff. But it is certainly not the 50 to 100,000 that the government has been trumping. And you wonder, why would they come out with stuff like that, which will be held against them at some stage in the future when it becomes quite clear that this was not the cost reduction that was achieved.
But the context of this, Matt, is that affordability has reached a point in apartment building that the only buyers of apartments right now are approved housing bodies.
It's not the vultures. It's not the vultures are gone.
Yeah. No, so the fact of the matter is that I honestly believe in May 22, when Dara abolished build to rent, which are these studio apartments and so on, it was a huge mistake. And I've interviewed so many people, and you can call them vulture funds or whatever. Greystar would be an example, and they say immediately you just stop 9,000 units not being built. And I think what they've done in the Custom House, they said, okay, so it wasn't 41,000, 40,000 built last year, it was only 30,000. Where did the 10,000 go missing? Because they were based on commencement orders, and where they've gone missing is in apartments. And I think that this follows on, and that there's a logic to this.
I think the issue really actually, the savings aren't because of suddenly studio-sized apartments been somewhat smaller. It's more to do with sort of community spaces, isn't it? Sort of giving over 5%. That in some respects this might be a redundant exercise. But, I think we have to remember that, planning doesn't involve just everything on a sort of a standalone basis. For reasons I won't go into, I was out in Tyrrellstown a couple of weeks ago.
Where's that?
There you see, that's exactly, it's out beyond Blanchardstown, right?
Okay.
And
is that near Mulhuddart?
Yeah, that area, okay. And I was out there, and a lot of new housing has been built. And as we're going through it, we're discussing, where are the facilities? I mean, you've got housing, you've got low-rise apartments, and they go on and they go on. And I know because of where we had to go from sort of the entrance to the estate to the back of the estate where we're going was definitely close to a mile. And you're going, where are all the shops? Where are all, the sort of green areas limited, but where are the facilities for children to play and all the rest of it and stuff? And these are the sort of the new developments. And you're sort of going, well, how well planned out are they as to what actually people actually need? So I can understand why the planners do think that they, want to get in various facilities, but there have been countless times, particularly in inner city Dublin, and I've seen this in Cork as well, where you have new apartment blocks built or you have new commercial premises, and there's a determination that the bottom floor has to be made available for shops and creches and things like that, and the units just get left there empty. Like there's no actual demand to put anything in there. And if anything does go in there on a high rent, probably, it damages existing shops and existing trading in other places in the near neighbourhood. That's in inner city areas. But anyway, the other thing I want to bring up with you before we go to the break is why nobody seems to be really taking Donald Trump seriously anymore. And let me give you the example of it this week. Our big concern in Ireland, amongst the many concerns in relation to his tariffs and taxes policy and whatever, is pharma. And he came out and suddenly he started ramashing about 200% tariffs on imported pharmaceutical products. Although he did start saying they wouldn't be brought in immediately, they would be brought in 12 to 18 months' time. So if you normally, in a normal environment, if you start talking about 200% tariffs, that should have sent the share prices of the major pharma companies immediately firing downwards. Markets ignored it. They just don't take his stuff seriously anymore. Taco trades. Trump always chickens out. There is no way that he's going to introduce 200% tariffs or 100% tariffs or even 50% tariffs in relation to pharma. He might cover it with the blanket tariff of 10%, which looks like will be the outcome of any outline deal between the US and the EU. But this is just another example at the moment why Trump has just actually, I think, been ignored by most sane people, that he's no longer a serious punter to take into account. What do you think?
Well, first of all, I do have that same reaction to the 200% tariffs proposal, which was kind of like a throwaway remark, which, he really should know better, and the lack of, Pfizer and Glaxo and Klein and all those, there was no tremor even on their share price, which there should have been if they thought it was a reality.
Yeah, because the Americans don't want to be paying an awful lot more for their Viagra, for their Ozempic and for their Botox. So, all products I'm sure he's intimately
we're recording this at lunchtime on Friday. Yeah. And I would say by the time the last word goes out, there will be a significant development in the whole tariffs area today, the 11th of July.
It depends on what you call a significant development. Because
a letter.
He will call it a deal.
Yeah.
But basically, if what might happen is some sort of framework, which means these trade deals take years to actually...
No, absolutely. But insofar as it moves things on to not having a framework agreement. So there are two elements to this. One is the reciprocal tariffs. Will we stick on the 10%? And I think there may be a bit of wishful thinking on this, but there are noises emanating from the EU ambassadors in Brussels, and there's a meeting on Monday about this, that there is a hope that, and Cliff Taylor has a very extensive piece about this, and he explains that there are two types of...
This is Cliff Taylor in the Irish Times.
Yes. There are two types of tariffs. There's the reciprocal tariffs, which are the regular things that we talk about, from aluminium, steel, cars, food, and so on, for which there is 10%, and they might stick on that. Separately, there's what they call these Section 232 tariffs from the US Trade Expansion Act.
And this all becomes about what's essential in the national interest for the United States.
Yeah.
That these are essential products.
So pharma's in the latter one.
Yeah.
And they're waiting on this report, which now Lutnick says will be published in late July. And so therefore, at the moment, there's zero on pharma. And so therefore, even though we might get clarity on the reciprocal tariffs from Ireland's over 60 billion of exports of pharma supplies, that uncertainty will remain. But I do agree with you this. I was speaking to someone who is one of the biggest experts in logistics in the supply chain. And I said, what's your take on where this will all land? And he said, where it's all going to land is continued uncertainty. You know what I mean? That there will not be a point in the next 12 months, he said, where it will be known. There will continue to be reality shows, different expressions of what might apply. So,
it's not
if
good
uncertainty, and if uncertainty and investment are your concerns, I think you're going to stay worried.
I'm sorry, and I'm not saying that we should be ignoring what blather Trump comes out with, because it does have an impact, and it does mean that an awful lot of work has to be done between the EU and the US to try and smooth things over, and in all likelihood will lead to additional tariffs. And there are considerable concerns still within Irish government sectors and within Irish industry about the impact of those additional 10% tariffs if that we go, because there were already tariffs in relation to food and drink products, and this does create issues of viability as to whether American companies will want to buy in these products from this side of the Atlantic if they cost an awful lot more, and whether they try and push the additional charges to them back onto the suppliers. And given that the dollar has already fallen in value so dramatically, that does serious damage to the profit margins of Irish companies, which is why I think you'll see more and more effort made into finding alternatives to America for many of these products in the future. Anyway, I want to come back and talk about what I suppose is becoming the story of the week, the presidential election campaign. Sean Kelly of Fine Gael is out. Catherine Connolly has announced that she's going to launch her campaign next week. I mean, I'm sometimes confused. Surely if you announce you're going to launch your campaign next week, that means you've launched your campaign. But then, will Mary Lou McDonald launch a campaign? Because she has shifted her position substantially, and to a point where I think she must be now the favourite to be the next president. And we'll discuss that when we come back after this break.
This episode of Path to Power is brought to you by Greenman, an Irish investment management firm. Greenman Open focuses on investing in grocery-anchored retail real estate, designed to generate stable, long-term income. The fund is managed in Ireland. Learn more on the website greenmanopen.com.
Now, before making any investment, it's important to understand the risks. Investments could go up or down, and past performance is not a reliable guide to future results. Greenman Open is a regulated LTIF, but like all investments, it carries risks. You should always seek advice from a financial professional before investing. So welcome back to Path to Power. So let's talk about the presidential election campaign, and let's get straight to Mary Lou for the Áras, and we will get to Catherine Connolly and Sean Kelly along the way. But twice earlier this year, Mary Lou McDonald specifically ruled out the possibility that she would run for the presidency. She did it once on the steps of Stormont in March. The second time was to Patrick Keelty in an interview on the Late Late Show on RTÉ television. Quite emphatic. Last weekend, Shane Coleman writes a piece in the Business Post outlining why she would be the best candidate for Sinn Féin. And lo and behold, the following day, when she's asked questions about that, she suddenly starts humming and hawing, and she's not ruling herself out. And she's saying that Sinn Féin is assessing all of its options and that there will be an announcement in due course towards the end of July and into August. And suddenly you look at the situation and you go, oh, well, there must be a real possibility she is going to run, and we can go through all the ins and outs of that in a moment. But the way I look at it, and you look at who's going to go up against her, unless Fianna Fáil or Fine Gael can land a major figure, I don't see how Mary Lou McDonald doesn't win. Well,
a couple of leaps of faith there. First of all, my understanding, speaking to Sinn Féin people, is for a month-long process. They have actually been consulting with their membership far and wide, and they came back with 3 conclusions. with a definite conclusion there wasn't going to be a left unity candidate, that if Fine Gael are having a candidate, Sinn Féin will have their own candidate to push their own brand and so on. And from the moment that you interviewed Senator Frances Black and she was out of the picture, that told me, because she was the most likely Sinn Féin-led compromise candidate. They were never going to support Catherine Connolly or Mike, what's his name, from the WHO, Mike Ryan or anyone else. That was all nonsense. So now you're down to three people. You're down to Michelle O'Neill, you're down to John Finucane, and you're down to Mary Lou. And so let's just say she is the most electable of the three in terms of name recognition and so on. So now
not just name recognition. Likeability on the canvas.
We'll put it like this. She is a little bit Marmite, but she certainly is more winnable than the other two. I agree with that, right? So now I always go to the binary options. She gets elected or she doesn't get elected. So she gets elected, what way does that spin for Sinn Féin? So number one, she's not going to be Taoiseach. Okay. Number two, are you shifting your best asset into what is a non-political job, who won't be able to really move the Sinn Féin brand forward because she's above politics. So that is a kind of major concession. Also, you have a situation that I would say the biggest cheerleaders for her to be the candidate and maybe even the presidency will be the government, because she is a major thorn in their side. You've only to listen to leaders' questions, order of business, and she is the most difficult, the most obstreperous, the most disrespecting, and personally...
I'm sure Pierce Doherty could do that job equally well.
Well, that brings me on to...
Pierce Doherty could get under the skin of the leaders of Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael. I mean, the only thing you'd wonder about for Sinn Féin's point of view is, undoubtedly talented as Pierce Doherty is he, to the minds of many voters, a bit shouty? And does he actually also know to differentiate between what's important and what isn't important, rather than getting outraged about everything?
Well, I'm hearing that the biggest cheerleader for Mary Lou to be the presidential candidate is actually Pierce Doherty. Surprise, surprise. And there is no doubt in my mind he would be the leader. When you take the nationwide situation, the Ardcorlia, the northern votes, him from Donegal, that he would actually end. So in a scenario that, to me, it tells me that Mary Lou has given up on being Taoiseach. Her earliest...
If she goes for it.
So we're doing if she gets elected or if she doesn't get elected.
Well, I think we need to break it into a couple of parts. I think we need to break it into what the campaign would be like to see if she would get elected. And then we need to talk about what sort of president she would be. And of course, what type of president she would be very much part of the debate and discussion during an election campaign.
But sorry, just this is in the context of, is it best for Sinn Féin that she stands? So I've done all that on the basis that it's a short-term win, but perhaps a long-term loss if she won.
Hang on. I think the way they might be thinking in this, right, is that you say that if she gets into the role as leader, as president, she has to relinquish the leadership of Sinn Féin. But would she really leave her Sinn Féin membership card at the gates to Áras an Uachtaráin? Or would she see it as that her role as President of Ireland, and I think this then would become a major debate during the presidential campaign, that she would see her role as President to be a persuader for a border poll and for a unification.
Well,
hold on a second. Listen to me. Just listen to me, right? That she would see her election as president as been an endorsement for moving this state closer towards reunification, and would use her position, even if it was at odds with the government of the day, to try and encourage that situation and urge a border poll.
Well, no, there's a big issue here. And I think it's Article 15 of the Constitution, sets out absolutely the representative role of the President. The job of the President is not to change the country. That is the job of the Parliament and the government elected by the Parliament. And it is not the job of the President to be a counterpoint to our pillars of democracy and says, well, actually, she could say, what we need to do in relation to the 6 counties or anything else. That will not. And the government have turned a blind eye to an elderly guy who's, got failing health and, is becoming a little bit esoteric, but they've given him a lot of free rein to speak on issues of foreign affairs and so on. And
hasn't he set a precedent?
No, but he hasn't. He hasn't said we should have a border poll.
No, but hold on. She mightn't say that in exam. Mary Lou McDonald is clever enough to know how to actually frame these things. But I think she would actually try and use the position. Well, I'm making assumptions here, and these are the things that would have to be teased out in an election campaign, but that she would regard herself, if she campaigns on the basis that she wants to be a president eventually for all of Ireland and wins, she would then be able to say that she has a mandate to actually use the office of Áras an Uachtaráin to persuade the people of the North to join her in a 32-country Ireland.
The situation is where you're getting right back to the constitutional crisis of Paddy Donegan here. Like the situation is, it is clearly set out in the Constitution. And while a government could turn a blind eye to Michael D, if someone's going to completely reconstruct the role, the representative role of the presidency and say it's actually a catalyst for change in Ireland, anything other than a titular...
Mary Robinson...
No, she did not.
No, hold on. Just saying, isn't that how she set it out? Isn't that how she sold herself? And even if she did through subtle ways, that helped then set the ground for change, like the decriminalisation of homosexuality, such as anyone has moved through with Mary McAleese and others, that these were powerful influencers in setting the tone for much of the social change which has taken place in Ireland over the last 30 to 40 years. And I take your point that the government has sort of deliberately turned a blind eye to Michael D. Higgins and his pronouncements in relation to domestic matters like housing and foreign affairs matters. But because he has actually managed to do it without being stopped, wouldn't that not give encouragement to his successor to continue on that path? And to continue the point that I made, if she was to win a presidential election, well, making it quite clear that she saw herself as the president, as a persuader for a united Ireland, she could then claim a mandate to do that.
This is nonsense. The fact of the matter is, under the Good Friday Agreement, there's very prescribed circumstances set out for a border poll. Absolutely. And it's actually a matter for the British government, in conjunction with the Irish government, to decide. If she decides that as president, up in the park, she's going to unilaterally negotiate with the British government over the heads of the Irish government, it simply is a recipe for chaos. Now, I actually think she won't put that...
You're thinking in straight lines. I'm
thinking in legal, constitutional terms.
You see, you have to be more imaginative than that, and I suspect she and Sinn Féin are going to be more imaginative.
I don't know what type of mushrooms you've been eating this morning, but the fact of the matter is that, I can see how she's electable for all the reasons you said. I think a female president, and I'll be quite frank with you, the Soc Dems have rode in today behind Catherine Connolly. Tells me, number one, no one else has rode in behind her. She's
Mick Wallace was out during the week supporting her.
And Brian Stanley will also be... the Sinn Féin and Labour have not said me too. They have not.
So therefore, she probably still will get to 20. She'll probably get people before Profit and others and stuff like that. But I wonder, let's just talk.
But what I'm trying to say to you is this: Sinn Féin have a real prospect of winning this with Mary Lou. I want to acknowledge that. But what I'm trying to say is this, and I would say also there would be a feeling, the government are going to be there for 5 years. The government got re-elected. Fine Gael have been in power 15, 16 years. You know what? They've majority of 20. They shouldn't have everything. And I can see a very strong narrative for a kind of strong figure, which is not FFG, to be the president. So for all those things, but I'd have to come back to one thing. What if she runs and loses, right? What if she runs and loses? Did you actually, because Eamon Ryan did this at a particular point as well, is it actually, well, you're so interested in being Taoiseach, you actually made a serious bid for the presidency, which was opting out of national politics in a way. So I think there's a downside risk for Mary Lou.
I think it's limited.
Okay.
And I don't think she has to resign the leadership of Sinn Féin to run to be president. Maybe she would. But I mean, if she was to lose, I think she could return to the Dáil. That said, it might be difficult that she would be regarded in political circles, if not in overall circles, as something of a busted flush. It depends on the circumstances in which she would lose. And let's get to that. Let's just, before we go back to Mary Lou, Catherine Connolly is an interesting one as well, because Mick Wallace was out very much saying last week, maybe he'd think of seeking a nomination, but he wouldn't if Catherine Connolly did. I wonder, there's two things I wonder about Catherine Connolly. One, will her support of Syria go against her? Herself and Mick Wallace and Claire Daly and former TD Maureen O'Sullivan were part of a group who travelled in 2017 to Syria. And so she will be tarred as being supportive of the al-Bashir regime.
In the context of pro-Russia?
Something like this. Well, it's not pro-Russia. It's sort of anti-American.
But I thought the Russians were propping up al-Bashir.
But the thing is that the way that they were talking at the time was very much sort of anti-American, and also that, the people of Syria aren't as upset with al-Bashir. He's not as bad as you think he is. I'm paraphrasing here, right? So just to be careful in relation to that. That said, I'm not sure too many of the electorate will get completely worked up about what her position on Syria is and how much of an issue that would be in an electoral campaign. But the other thing is, how well known is Catherine Connolly?
Yeah, this is in Dublin. Well known,
anywhere outside of Galway, I'd say.
Yeah.
Maybe for some of the political junkies who used to see her as Lascon Corla turning up on the news and all the rest of it. But I suspect that in most parts of the country, if you were to do a lineup, people would be hard pressed to pick her out. I think the left thinks she's this figure that, sort of almost like great figure that people will row in behind.
Well, I'm not so sure Sinn Féin Labour think that.
I
agree with you.
I don't think Labour do for historical reasons.
So I'm actually coming round to the view. I think Catherine Connolly it would make a fine president. I've nothing against her candidacy, but any poll data I've showed didn't show traction or connection with the public. She's not got really strong name recognition. She's quite senior in age insofar as...
And she's only 69. She's only a couple of years older.
Only 69. Well, I mean, I consider myself fucked at 65. So she's probably passed her sell-by date as well.
That's outrageous. I disassociate myself from those comments.
About me?
No, about her. You can say what you like about yourself.
Okay, so we'll come back to Mairead McGuinness.
Yeah, but hold on. Yeah, we will, because I suppose what's interesting there is that I wonder how many votes would she take away from Mary Lou McDonald. That's just...
Well, they'll come back to her.
They would in transfers. Okay.
So she'll be, and I think our big Achilles heel is how would she do in Dublin? I don't see Dublin coming out, working class Dublin coming out in droves to vote for her.
Okay, and they probably wouldn't have come out in droves to go for Sean Kelly either. He said it was an enormous disappointment to him during the week, his deciding not to go for it. He came up with some lines about John B. Keane and sort of like,
every day you're out of Kerry or something.
Yeah, that sort of stuff.
The day lost.
The day lost.
Well, Mairead McGuinness...
Can we just say in the Sean Kelly thing, quite clearly, Sean Kelly did the calculation. He did two calculations. One was that he wasn't going to beat Mairead McGuinness, and the second calculation was, if I can't beat Mairead McGuinness, there's no point in looking to see can I win the actual presidential election. I think Mairead McGuinness has a major problem, and I don't think it's necessary. Well, I think that Irish Times story that we discussed last week, even though Simon Harris and others were out to defend her, that she did absolutely nothing wrong, followed the rule book in relation to claiming of expenses, and the 800,000 in expenses, only part of that would have been in relation to rent, and it was over 16 years. This is the rent of the premises that her family owned. That will stick with a number of people, but what will really stick with a lot of people, where I think she's in big trouble if you look at the global trends in relation to elections like this, she will be regarded as the establishment candidate. And I suspect that we may be at a point whereby the electorate will use the presidential election to go for the anti-establishment candidate against the establishment candidate, which is why she's in deep trouble if she's running against Mary Lou McDonald for Fine Gael, a party which has never won the presidential election. And I think that raises all sorts of issues as to whether Fine Gael needs somebody else and who Fianna Fáil will get, because Mary Lou McDonald, if she's up against Mairead McGuinness and somebody like a Peter Power or a Mary Hanifin, whoever it is that Fianna Fáil can pull up from the ranks, Mary Lou McDonald is going to win.
Well, first of all, I must apologise to those who are paying the €6 who feel this particular episode has turned into a party political broadcast on behalf of Mary Lou to be president. I must apologise because you've actually had a polemic for the last 10 minutes of why Mary Lou would make a fantastic president and how she's going to win.
Sorry, I'm only looking at this. I'm looking at this objectively. I'm not promoting anyone for being president.
Well, you're promoting Mary Lou quite clearly.
Saying, well, sorry, I wonder though, if Fine Gael were able to persuade somebody like Enda Kenny to run against her, would it be entirely different? So if Fianna Fáil had a different candidate.
Let's get back to the real world. The real world is Fine Gael opened their nominations on Monday. They closed them on Wednesday evening. There will only be one candidate, be Mairead McGuinness. Mairead McGuinness went the time Gay Mitchell was nominated in 2011, was it? And so on. And he was a disastrous candidate. And there's a feeling that, it's not a Johnny-come-lately, that she's always had a grow for this job. She's had a distinguished career as an MEP and as an EU commissioner. She would make a fine ambassador for Ireland. And I can tell you, the level of support within grassroots FG is very solid for her.
I don't doubt her abilities or her capabilities.
No, but what I'm trying to say is this, that the fact that she's in the race early, the fact that she's been polled by far nearly getting double anyone else's in the polls, that you cannot dismiss Mairead McGuinness I think she will in all circumstances. Now, and this brings us on to the big issue. What are Fianna Fáil going to do?
Before we get to Fianna Fáil, key questions about Mairead McGuinness, and I'm not doubting her professional competency and capability in the least. However, she would be regarded as an establishment candidate, and Mary Lou McDonald would play the anti-establishment card. Also, is Mairead McGuinness as personable and as likeable as Mary Lou McDonald? Will she relate to people? There are many people that she will relate to, the sort of Fine Gael people, but will she relate beyond Fine Gael people? Does she have the common touch that Mary Lou McDonald has?
Well, first of all, she's never been a member of the Oireachtas. She's never been a TD senator or minister. So I don't know if she's as establishment figure. She's definitely a Fine Gael figure. She did the Ear to the Ground programme as a TV journalist.
She's a former EU commissioner. How more establishment can you get?
No, that's the point, though, that she's not a party hack as such, that she has held international roles, and also bear in mind that she topped the poll in the vast sprawling constituency of Midlands Northwest. What I'm trying to say is this, that given the actual uncompetitive nature of everyone we've spoken about week in, week out, she actually is the front runner. She's going to be nominated on Wednesday evening. And I would say that the full resources of the Fine Gael party, who've never won the presidency, and I just wouldn't dismiss her out of hand in a context where Fianna Fáil don't compete.
And do you think will Fianna Fáil just decide that Mairead McGuinness is not just a Fine Gael candidate, but she's in a sense the unity candidate?
No, well, that sticks in their craw. That absolutely sticks in their craw. And
would they not be better off running somebody and transferring
Fianna
votes?
Fáil, like in a lot of things, are actually sleepwalking through this. They've actually thought this problem will go away. They've given all the reasons why they don't go full-blooded for it. They haven't been able to persuade any of their big hitters. Now, if they persuaded, say, Maura Gagan Quinn or someone to come out of retirement, maybe they can pull this out of the hat. But from Joe Duffy to Mary Kennedy to celebrity candidates to Mary Hanafin to Eamon O'Keefe, to Barry Andrews and so on, they have actually really had no strategy, no plan, and you know what is it that Roy Keane says?
Fail to prepare to fail.
Exactly. Well, that's where Fianna Fáil are at.
Well, Sir Fianna Fáil, there's no way.
And they think it'll all be grand in September, that they can fix this.
Well, Micheál Martin is the choice of many members of the party, but he doesn't want to do it. He's not going to do it. You can forget about that. Maura Gagan Quinn is an interesting one that you throw as a name. Again, it's a blast from the past to an extent. But you got to remember, when she was appointed to cabinet in 1979, was it? She would have been the first woman in cabinet since the time of the establishment of the first cabinet. And she would have achievements such as being...
And she has an EU career.
She had a European commissioner herself.
She decriminalised homosexuality.
That's exactly the one I was going to come to, which would actually be a sort of a major
She's
thing
Gail Gore.
But I'll tell you what I think, and this comes back to the discussion we had earlier, and it would be so interesting if Mary Lou McDonald is in this campaign.
Contain yourself. I'm actually shocked how gushing you are about this whole thing.
You see, if you just waited, you'd actually
I've listened to 30 minutes of this Ramesh.
No, it's actually a lot less than that, and it's not Ramesh.
It feels like it.
There would be some very interesting things. She would be asked, undoubtedly, in the debates about her legal action against RTE. Can you imagine her continuing that legal action if president, or would she be prepared to drop it on the basis of her becoming president? Her husband has a legal action against Shane Ross. Would he continue that if he was there?
Well, they are entitled to continue
Absolutely.
that.
I'm just saying these are the things that will come up, Ivan.
Yeah.
That's what I'm trying to... And the other thing, which I think would be, and possibly this is one of the big reasons why Sinn Féin would be very interested in running Mary Lou McDonald, as well as being very hopeful that she would win it. I think the issue of a united Ireland would become the big talking point in the election campaign, because Mary Lou McDonald's politics, and I've said this to you before, is based more than anything else. It's not housing, it's not health, it's not immigration, things like that. It's a united Ireland. Mary Lou McDonald's reason for being in politics...
Mr. Cooper.
Just let me finish. Her reason for being in politics is that she wants to advance the cause of a united Ireland. And I think that she and Sinn Féin would use the presidential election campaign to tap into what they believe is a nascent trend, an emerging trend for people to support a 32-county Ireland. And I tell you this much as well, she'd have the likes of Kneecap out there campaigning for her and doing concerts and the rest of it.
Lovely. Okay, well now, first of all, on the day that's in it, the 11th of July, heading into the 12th, not only is the 6 counties a complete sectarian basket case, but I'm surprised at you and your double standards, because it's become a racist basket case as well. When I look at those toppers of mannequins of migrants in Moygashel, it's absolutely disgusting. And people, and sorry,
those are the loyalists. Those are not Republicans who are building the bonfires and doing
Correct. Well, what I want to say is this, that the whole lot of them up there are actually in a time warp, and most people in the South do not want to import that conflict, do not want to import that sectarianism which does not exist in the South, and now import that racism that we've seen in Ballymena. And actually,
there's your partitionist mentality.
No, absolutely. And to drag the presidency and the 26 counties into all of that, no thank you.
Okay, but see, that then could become part of the way Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael respond to Sinn Féin.
Well, they won't be as overtly partitionist as I've just been there. But like what I'm trying to say...
Well, that's part of their problem, isn't it? Because they're not sure. They wouldn't be sure as to how they would actually campaign. Yeah. They would be wondering, well, do we try and say, yes, we're a United Ireland party, but we're not really? And that's where Sinn Féin then would have an advantage over them in any debates about a United Ireland as part of a presidential campaign. Can Fine Gael or Fianna Fáil put up a presidential candidate who will say, oh, yes, I'm in favour of United Ireland, but, not just yet, not for the next 30 years, for the next 50 years.
In my view, when Martin McGuinness ran for the presidency, you saw what is the Republican constituency in the South? 14%.
14 years ago, things have changed. Younger generation.
After Brexit, they've got worse. Actually, whatever the cost of United Ireland is, after Brexit, it's become a lot more expensive, because not only is the North a sectarian basket case, but it's also an economic, desperate deprived area, because the UK has lost 15% of its economy. So actually the thoughts of unity which actually had a little bit of steam under it 3 or 4 years ago, post-Brexit the unification question has become more difficult.
Okay.
I don't think taxpayers have a real appetite for picking up that tab. And but what I'm really objecting to today is that you've given this polemic of all the reasons why Mary Lou would make a great president. I put it like this.
No, I didn't.
I can
analyse.
I
gave you the list of reasons why she might win.
All right.
I didn't express any preference.
But that's much the same thing.
No,
but anyway,
but
anyway.
Right. In our subscriber edition, we will be talking about...
I want to talk about Comreg. Did you see their thing about likely scams? Okay. I want to tell you, Comreg are a disgrace.
Well, we're going to talk about another commission of investigation into child sex abuse in secondary schools. But we're going to be giving the most for time to a list of questions that have come in from listeners, which we're going to get to. Some of them are really good. One in particular about aircraft noise near Dublin Airport, which I think you'll be interested in, given that you indulged your fetish for Michael O'Leary during the week when you were standing in for Pat Kenny in yet another one of your jobs in the media, with the media that you deny been part of. So we'll talk to you about your Michael O'Leary interview. All of those questions. Ursula von der Leyen, your great friend, Shane Ross and Finian McGrath and their evidence this week in relation to the Super Juniors cases, maybe a bit on student contributions. There's lots of other things in there for
and
the
also the
subscriber
postcode
edition.
lottery that is cancer treatment in this country.
Yes. Big time. Okay, that's all in the subscriber edition. Go on, you'll love it if you subscribe at a bargain price.
We won't have any more
€6.
Mary Lou nonsense in the next episode. We'll be spared of that, hopefully.
But I suspect if she decides to declare...
No, I've heard your goddamn view. I didn't want to encourage you to repeat all that diatribe, but carry on.
So until the next time, from me, Matt Cooper.
From me, Ivan Yates.
Thank you for indulging us.